Yep, we are. Hey guys, hey everyone.
So hello everyone. So I'm Krishabh. Um,
And I am Sri Charan here. Welcome to MLH Local Hack Days GDSC session. I am Sri Charan here. How is everyone? And yes, for the Indian audiences, happy Makar Sankranti, happy Lori, and happy Pongal. Let us know in the chats how you are. How's life going in COVID right now? I hope you are excited for this first session on MLH local build hack. We will be starting the session shortly. Oh, and one more thing. Yes, this is important. It's a React and Node.js. They are prerequisites. You don't have to know much. It's a you know you need to know the basics. That's about it. So yes, we will be building an OAuth session with React and Node.js. So Krishabh, how are you? How is COVID going for you?
not nice. College is supposed to reopen. Didn't reopen.
Yeah, yep. That was a bummer. Yes. So we will be sharing the template for the template for front end and back end, which will we hope this is you'll code along with the session. So you will be providing the templates as GitHub links. Clone them and install the dependencies. Run npm I for that. So once you do that, you will be ready to code along with us. And let's hope you guys learn something. It's pretty interesting. OAuth is pretty interesting. We'll tell you what it is, and it we are actually using a pretty unusual third party this time, not your common links. So wait for the links. We'll be sharing the front end and back end for React and Node.js links on of GitHub on YouTube. Keep an eye on the chat. I guess you can see the links on the chat for the front end and back end repo. Go to the links, clone them, and install the dependencies. Keep them ready, and we will get started. All right. I suppose we can start now.
Yeah. Yeah. So, 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 yeah
I guess you can start sharing your screen and we will get started. All right, guys. So, welcome to MLH Local Build Hack. And today's session, we'll be having OAuth implementation with Node.js and React. So, we'll be doing both backend and front end implementation, and we'll show you how they both work well together. It's really exciting how it goes. It's used in a lot of companies, and we'll show you how it is how it is implemented. Let's go.
Yeah, let's begin. So, how many of you have used OAuth before for like Google, Facebook for your login purposes?
A lot of applications use Google, actually. Yes, Google, and you would have seen Facebook, you would have seen GitHub, a lot of third party applications, right?
Yeah, yeah. So in this session, we'll be teaching you how to make your own OAuth server. So basically, you will host your own server with your user data on it, and third-party applications will access your server to access that data. So now let's get on with the basics. Before we go over to what, I think I have to teach JWT first. So how normally, how would someone implement authorization? So you usually use a session cookie that's stored in a database. Then and you share that cookie with the user. The user then again uses a cookie to access the data. And now, if you had thousands or 10,000 users accessing the same server, won't the database get overloaded because the session cookie they keep on checking the session cookie exists. So this is why JWT exists. It's just a storage, no token. It just says no storage, just token wise. So the basic explanation is first is the JWT is divided into three parts: the algorithm, the data, and the Hmac or a hash. So JWT supports many cryptography algorithms. That's why we have a special field for that to specify which algorithm is using. Then the main data payload, which stores the basic details such as name, email, etc. So this is completely configurable by you. And finally, the Hmac. So what Hmac is you hash with a password and give the hash and data to a person. Again, if you get a data back, you can verify the integrity of the data you sent to that person. So now we got JDA OAuth fundamentals. We go on with the OAuth basic definition. So a third party OAuth 2 is a common use framework that websites and web applications use to request limited access to a user's account on another application. OAuth also allows the user to grant this access without exposing their login credentials to a requesting application. So, so then this means that users can fine tune which data you want to share with a third party application. So when you log into Google, right, after you do the normal password thing, Google asks you what data you want to share with it. That's the whole thing about OAuth. Like it gives you what allows you to control the amount of data you share with the user, with the third party.
In layman's terms, what we are doing is we are giving a third party application permissions to access the resources on our behalf. So when we say Google authentication, we let Google take care of the authentication on our behalf. We tell them that you're authenticated to give information, our information to them, and you let them know that we are legit users and we are requesting for those resources that you're sharing. So that's basically OAuth 2.0. Instead of the application itself creating login mode, you do it for in on behalf of Google does it on behalf of you.
So now the basic terminologies you need to know for what these are very important. So first part is the client. The client is application developed by a different developer that accesses your API. So basically, it's a third-party application that uses your Google OAuth. The user is a user of whom the third-party application is trying to access. Like the data of like the third-party application is accessing the data of this user. Access token is a special JW token that's used by a client application. It's like specially stored in a client application backend to access the user's data stored on your own server. Then authorization code. It's a temporary code that's exchanged for an access token in the authorization server. And then the grant types, the different ways to get this access token. First one, you can use the authorization code and get back access token. There are other ways such as using a refresh token to get the access token. Then flows, the OAuth allows multiple different processes to log in. So they're usually called the OAuth flows. So this is a basic authorization code flow for an OAuth server. First, we have a third-party application, the client, then the browser. The client requests the data from for this example, we'll assume OAuth server is the Google server, and this is our server, the client application. So first, our application sends a authorization request. Then the user login and consent. That's basically username, password, email. Then you allow which data is allowed you want to share, such as the email, your contacts, and other data. After that, the authorization server will send a special authorization code grant to your own backend. So you remember that authorization code, you can exchange that for an access token. Now, to finally get the data from the Google servers, you send a access token with the request parameters, and you get back the user data. So that's the basic gist of OAuth flow. This is a basic authorization code flow. There's another flow called implicit flow, but it's a deprecated version, and I'm not going into it. So I hope you have understood till this part. This is like the major part of OAuth done. Like mention in the comments if you have understood. Yeah, I'm seeing people have understood it. Okay. Yeah, now we get on with our Okta part. So now if you remember carefully from the previous diagram, there's a special authorization server and a token server and a user info server. So basically what Okta does is it provides an authorization server and a token server for us. Only thing we have to worry about is the user info part over here in the bottom. So again, the vote. So the authorization server Okta our resource server, basically the third party application is trying to access from us, and then the client themselves and us. So again, this is a basic authorization code flow. It sends an access token, then authorization consent. Basically, it's asking if basically its authorization consent is your password and permissions. Then access token. You send the client sends a request with access token to our resource server, and then we get a response. So I hope you understood what Okta is doing here, right? It's basically acting as an authorization server. We don't have to care about authorization. We just worry about our own data we are storing. So in our case, the client or the third-party app is the React app that Sricharan is going to make. And the resource server is a Node.js backend that I'm going to be working on. So I hope you understood this till this part, like mentioned in the comments. Yeah, people are getting it. That's good. Now let's get to the coding part, shall we? Enough of the explanations. First, we create our Okta authorization server. To that, this Google Okta developer. Sign up. Yeah, they give you multiple ways to sign up. We're using GitHub, simpler. And that's how, this is the Okta admin dashboard. So basically what Okta does is that give us our own domain name. For this case, dev78 something something. And this domain name is very important. This is basically a domain name of the authorization server that Okta has provided us. So now we create we create an application integration. For that, go to applications, then again click applications, create app integration, and select the first option, token-based OAuth 2.0. Since our application type is a React single page application, we select that over here. After that, you get a new settings page. Enter all the details. And then grant type, that's basically the authorization code, refresh code, implicit. So if you remember, I told you that we're using authorization code here. Now the sign in redirect URL. Now this is a pretty important topic. So when when you do the user login and consent, the authorization server has to redirect the user browser to somewhere, right? That is basically what we define over here. The After we do the login, username, password, we get we specify the callback URI where the authorization server will redirect. This is same as for the sign out redirect. And since we are not limiting it to some group, script group assignment for now. and click Save. Applications are created. Now you get a client ID. This will be very important, so remember that. And as your features. Now the other thing we're to do is create a testing user. To do that, just click directory, people, and you get a whole list of users. So now you get so click add person, enter your details, username, password, etc. And you create a test user. You can you don't need specifically have to use a create a test user from here. You have to Okta provides a API called users API where you can create users through an API route over here provided. The full documentation is here. So that's it for the Okta part. Now let's get to the Node.js part. So I hope you have cloned the repo that link has been sent. So basically, you have to clone the DSC MLH template, the repo, with my name on it. So mention in the comments if you have done that. So now let's say, I assume that everybody has cloned it. Let's start with the code. First, we create a Auth.js. So first thing we need to worry about. So first thing you need to worry about is the last process, the user data part. So you remember, like, we send the access token with the request parameter. You get back the user data. So first we're going to be working on that. And for Okta provides us a special package called Okta JWT Verifier. This is the documentation. And install. While that's going, import it. And now we create an instance. and the credentials. So remember the client ID we got from the Auth app, right? We'll be using that. Now we can either just copy paste it over here in code. Now experienced developers know that this is a terrible idea. Never copy to code, because if you're committing to a public repository, others can see your client ID, and it's a very bad thing. So instead, we'll be using environment variables. And then we need an issuer. What an issuer is, you remember that domain name we got from the Okta, right? This. So basically, this is we need to specify an URI that the our server will use to verify our access token. So in this case, over here is open security. Go to API, authorization servers tab, and issuers.uri. Just copy it. So again, we can't just paste it over here. We'll use the environment variable. So that's our verify done. Finally, we export it. And that's it. Now I have forgotten to explain our basic thing yet. Sorry. So first, now the package is installed in your npm live server, or I mean the resource server, are expressed in cores, because this is an API server. We have to use cores. So and port again we're either taken from the environment or 3000 as a default. Course allowed any web server to access it, create app, use a course config, and then finally listen on port 3000, whatever. Now we have to create our rules. These rules will be protected by a middleware. First we import, then initialize our router. Now we have to create a special middleware that will be using our verifier we just made over here. So code protected. Again, we have to import a verifier. Use. First, now the middleware function that we'll be using takes three parameters: the request, the response, and next. So use a verifier. First, we need to extract the access token. Now the access token will be sent in the form of bearer and the access token itself. Basically it's a JWT. access token, bearer access token, and this will all be stored in the authorization header of the HTTP request. So to extract it, it's pretty simple. Where then request dot headers and authorization. So now this auth header will contain the bearer with our access token, this whole part. Now we need to check if it exists, it's not null. Now if it exists, we want to split this by the space because it is whole string. So bearer plus space auth token, right? So where auth list split auth header dot split by the space. And now the access token will be stored in the location 1. So where access token auth list 1. And we finally have our access token. Now, first thing now we have to verify this access token actually is correct and it's the users. So we use a verifier. Access token is a parameter. And then wait, give me a second. I think I exported it wrong. So what's going on? So it seems that something's wrong with the verify fixer later. So now we verify access token, I mean JWT. Then because the verified JWT is a promise, we need to, it's a promise, so we need a then thing, JWT, and the function. Now the JWT, remember, like from our explanations, it contains 3 parts: the algorithm, the data, and the Hmac. The middle part is also known as claims. So basically, what a JWT is claiming claiming the user is like the username is John Doe. The subject is 1234556. So to access that, JWT dot email equal to JWT dot claims dot subject, because of the email of the OAuth user will be stored in the subject field, and we add that to a request context. Then now we catch the error. If there is any error verifying it, we just return a 403 response. That's basically forbidden, or the user is not allowed to access it. So that's done. use if, then else if the auth header doesn't exist, again we'll send a forbidden. So that is our middleware done. We will fix the verifier later. Now we'll get to the protected route. So it's our basic express function, request response. Response, you want to send the data. Status success. And the data will be hello request.email. So that is our protected route. Now the user first now has to get the access token to use this route. Now we export this. And we finally use that in here. Use the router, simply use app or use. Because the protected route, they're renaming it protected. And that is our router imported. Now let's work on getting this verifier fixed. So I already had a code ready, just in case something went wrong. So I'm going to check that first. So yeah, I called it wrong. Wait. Protected. Just remote access token from the thing, and just click verify dot. I'll just copy paste the code. It's much easier. Oh yeah, I thought exports or model.exports. My bad, sorry. So model.export, model.exports. So that's it. Now we fix this. Get a verify access token and access token. So verify access token, then JWT. So we remember access. We get a JWT. We check the claims, error. So that's done. Now, finally, we export our environment variables because if you remember, we're using environment variables here. So export. Client ID. We can just copy from here. Process. So export client ID and export issue. That's our OAuth authorization server URI. Security API. And export. Now that's all of the code done. Finally, we get to run this. So if you're using my template, I already defined the npm start script, npm start. Server listening on 3000. Now to test it, we don't have an access token right now to access the protected routes. So it should just give us a forbidden error. A forbidden. So that's our server done here. Now, finally, we have to deploy this so others can use our resource server. For that, I'll be using Heroku. And I'm assuming your people have installed the Heroku CLI because that's very important for this to work. We call it Auth. That's done. Now, first, go to Heroku. We create a new app. We call it LHD. Oh, because I already had one. Create app. And let's limit. We'll just delete this one first. Again, create new app, DSCMLH, United States, you can use Europe if you want. And our app is created. So Heroku already provides a bunch of stuff for us to deploy our app server. So we're using existing Git repo. Yes. Set git remote. So our remote name is Heroku. To push it to Heroku, just type git push Heroku. And Now this won't actually run because we have not set our environment variables yet. So if I open the logs, we should be getting an error. So now to set environment variables, just go to settings, reveal config vars, and set it manually. Client ID first. And then issue. And that's our environment variable set. Then finally, we restarted all our dynamos. It's basically restart a server. We open the logs. So I think there's still an issue. Next.js, that's correct. So must be a package thing. npm start index.js. Maybe I can again have to restart it. Okay, settings is on. HTTPS. Again, we restart it. And that's our resource server done. Check the logs. And it's listening. Server's listening on 297. That's whatever header course link it listen on. So now to finally test it, we open the link. Protected. Oh, forbidden. And that is our resource server finally done. Now, is there any doubts you can mention in the comments?
All right, so that is the backend up and running. Let us know if you have any doubts, and we will start up with our front end, our React application.
So, is there any doubts you can mention in comments? I will be happy to help out.
All right, so I guess we can start off with the front end. If you guys don't have any doubts. I have created, if you've cloned the React application, the GitHub repo, you would see that I would have put in some boilerplate over here. So let's get started. First and foremost, let's look at the Okta's documentation, right? So if you see Okta's documentation, what happens is it's a pretty huge development community for Okta. So if you see, you could see a lot of they have provided their documentation for a lot of the frameworks available right now. Since we are creating our application in React, let's go into single page application and React. So we have our entire sign in information that we are going to follow in this particular application. So what we can do is, let's start off and I'll explain the boilerplate from the beginning. So like I said, since Okta provides different documentation from different framework, it means it provides its own SDK, right? So for React, it uses this particular SDK called Okta React, and we also make use of the Okta Auth JS, right? These are the two dependencies that you have to download. And I've also added some other dependencies like Axios to call the protected route, right? That Krishabh just created for you. And we have a React router DOM for the routing purposes. All right. So what we can go ahead and do is, if you've downloaded, and you could have done your npm install to install your dependencies. So when you're first creating your React application and you want to put in your Okta's authentication, right? The first thing you bound to get down to do is put in your authorized configuration, right? Just like Krishabh did, and he got it from his user account, right? Okta's developer account. You have your client ID, you have your issuer, that is the Okta's authorization server that we are going to call. And we have this login callback over here. If you remember, this is the redirect URI. Once we log in and then we move into this part, right? So I'll show you how all that comes into play, the redirect URI and everything. So I'll just start off with the code base, right? First and foremost, how does React start working? It starts looking into the index.js thing, right? Index.js file. So coming in, we have given our browser router from our React router DOM. This allows us to create the routing part, right? So let's do, we have given that as a wrapper for our application, for our entire application. Now coming into our app.js, from there you can look into how I've routed. We have created two routes. One is the home route, one is the profile route. Now profile page is somewhere where you will be shown all the user information, right? I've created this particular route just to show you what information Okta gives you. All right, what all information Okta provides third-party applications like this particular application. So if I've created a user and I've authenticated Okta to share in my on my behalf. So what all data will Okta share to that particular application? We're going to look into that. We'll be looking at that in the profile component, right? So going on, we have our home.js. It's a simple home.js. We'll just build on top of it. And over here, you see a simple login button that says nothing but console log login, right? And then we have our profile.js that simply says profile page. Now, these both routes are, if you see, we have our login. And if we go to /profile, we can access our profile page. But this should not happen, right? Because profile page is a secured route, because if you haven't been authenticated, if you're not into your account, you can't see your profile page. That's as simple as that. So what we can do is, let's start and build our Okta application, right? Okta authentication. So first and foremost, like I said, Okta is a big developer community, and it provides a lot of documentation. And in the library that they've given provided for React, they have some of the functions that we can make use that would really help us, build our application not from scratch. That's the best part about Okta, guys. So over here, we are going to import some functions from the Okta framework, that Okta library that you've given. I'll tell you what each and everything means in a moment. So I've imported a component called security. There's login callback, and I'll give you something called secure route. Now, if you understand what it means, I mean, you can get understand, right? it secure route. Basically what it means is you can't access it without authentication. So what we are doing is, if you take Google or Facebook authentication, we would have to manually secure each and every route. You have to check if it is authenticated or not and all that purpose. But Okta over here provides a component itself that lets us see if the route is secure or not. So let's secure our profile route over here, and that's just it. We have secured our route. That's it. That's all you have to do. And how does Okta know that a route is secure or not, and how does that entire thing come into play? So for that, what we do is, we say something like, we wrap this entire routing component into the security component that Okta provides us. Okay, so we'll wrap this entire switch statement in here. All right, so this particular security wrapper that we can say, lets Okta know which route is secure and which route is not. It communicates with the Okta's um, framework, you can say, the Okta's backend, you can say. So what we can do over here is, we can go, but we've configured our Okta, we have added our Okta configuration, and how does this all come into play over here? So for that, what we have to do is, we can go and import that. So let's just say that import, we can say from at Okta and RJS. So this is another library that Okta provides for the front-end framework that would allow us to communicate using this configuration, right? You can't just directly access Okta's authorization server. You need to let the browser or the application tell you that this particular application has access to this particular authorization server that we've done over here, that we've given and we have formed, right? So for that, Okta provides us the Okta Auth class, and I'll import another function over here. I'll come back to that. So now that we have a class, we need to create an object, right? That's your simple oops concepts. So we'll go do that. We'll say Okta Auth, and what we can do is, so how do you create a new object? You use a new variable, and you say Okta Auth off, and then over here you have to pass in your Okta configuration, right? So VS Code automatically imports it for me. So when you pass in your Okta config, it lets Okta know that, okay, this client is trying to access this particular authorization server, right? So you've initialized your Okta server over here, but how do you pass that on to all the other children components that you've created, the pages, the home and profile pages? So that's where security wrapper comes into place. So when you say Okta Auth, you can just pass Okta Auth in there, right? It's as simple as that. You can just pass your component over here and it'll take care of it. That's all that is. So, and then what else do we need? Over here, I've told you, I'll tell you about this redirect URI. So how does this work? If you remember Krishab's explanation, he will tell you that once we log in, right, it will take us, if you're a new user, it will take you to Okta's login page, right? It will take you to Okta's login page, and after that you'll get, you have to tell the application to come back to our session, right? So how do you do that? That's where this redirect URI comes into picture. So for that, we have to create a function that's part of the documentation that tells Okta this is how you redirect. Okay, so bear with me for a moment while I tell you what function it is. It is called redirect original AI, URI. So this is a asynchronous function uh, which takes two parameters basically. The first parameter is your Okta Auth. You should pass your Okta Auth object, right? Because you have to use it somewhere. So let's say Okta Auth, and what else would you want to pass? You have to pass your original URI. Now this is what this is actually means is that this is the URL you need to redirect to once you've done your authentication through the Okta's authorization server, right? So what do you say over here is, for this we'll make use of another okay, over here, how do you redirect in React, guys? You use history, right? You use your use history hook and make use of that to redirect, right? So let's call that. So let's say const history, use history, and you've called that. Okay. So now what you say is, you say history dot replace. Replace lets you give that. Now this is where the two relative function of Octa.js comes into place. So if you remember, when you've given the authorization, when you created the application in the Okta developer account, right? It would have let you uh, put in your base URL. If you remember, you would have given a local host 8080. That is your base URL. So relative to that, we need to move into the so everything happens related to that, right? So what happens is, you would have to say over here original URI. So this is where I want to go to after my authorization. I want to go to the original URI where the application actually ran from, right? So you pass that. Sometimes some is in some cases it might end up being null or undefined, and that would create an error, right? So you have to handle that case. So over here you say slash or slash. So in case this becomes null or undefined, you go directly into your home component, right? Once you give that, where do you come from? So you have to give the base URL, right, which is our local host. So for that, how do you get your base URL in React? For that, you can use the window object that is given by JavaScript for us. So you say window.location.origin. Yes, origin gives you your base URL. So you provide all that, and Okta learns, okay, so this is the original base URL. And relative to that, I want to go to the original route that I have to after my redirect, right? So how do we tell Okta? So like I said, this security component communicates with Okta, right? So we have to tell security component, like, this is what you have to do when you need to redirect. So for that, we have the same function over here that says restore original URI, and we pass it over here. And that's about it. That's our routing taken care of. But it's not that simple. See, we have defined this redirect URL, right? Which says slash login slash callback, which means I log in through your Okta's login page. If you've used Google authentication, what would happen? You go to a website, you click on the Google button, and you're redirected to Google's login page, right? So similarly, you'll be redirected to Okta's login page. So when you come back, you have to handle that particular slash login slash callback. That this route is where comes back from this. So how do you handle that? Okta, see, they have considered each and every use case, right? So they said we'll take care of that too. So over here, you create another route, and you give the path as what was the path? The path was slash login and slash callback, right? So that was that, and we say exact, and which component handles that part? The login callback component that we've gotten from Okta itself. So that's one. So we've created three routes. One is the home component, home page, the one you can see over here, the login, which has a login button, and one will be the slash login slash callback, which handles Okta's authentication part, and the other is a profile, which is a secure route for now. Without logging in, you won't be able to come in, right? So now we'll save that. And next, what do we do after this? So we start handling our other home pages, right? So we'll come over here, and in our home page we've said login, right? Now what should we do to handle the login? We need Okta's login page, right? So this is what we do. So again, like I said, we've created the Okta object from the class, right? Using our configuration, Okta configuration, the client ID that we've gotten. So we can call that using our import statement over here. So we have our, okay, this is not the correct one. So we have Okta auth, and we are calling that from Okta React. All right. So once that is done, this is actually use Okta auth. We are Okta React provides us with a hook, like use history, that we can make use of. So when we say I'll leave this empty for now and I'll call use Okta Auth. Now this use Okta Auth hook provides us with a few objects, okay, that will help us perform these login functions. So first object that we are going to use is called the auth state, and the second one is the Okta Auth. Okta Auth, this is the object that we've created over here and we've passed on to the security, right? This Okta Auth is the object that we've created, and auth state is the object that stores the entire authentication information, whether there is the user information or whether the user is authenticated or not, he's logged in or not. So it takes care of the entire thing. Now what happens over here is when you connect with the security component over here, right, it makes a call to Okta, it makes an API call, and it tells you, it gets the user information, which user was logged in the latest, right? So when you do that, sometimes this Okta Auth API call populates this Okta Auth state object, and sometimes it might take us a bit of time, right, to populate the Auth state. So we need to handle that particular case, because sometimes if it turns out to be null or undefined, our application might break, right? So say if auth state is null, that is it's not available, what you can say is you can return something on the page that says loading, okay? So we have our loading page ready in case it takes some time to get our authentication details. Or in some cases, what would happen is, when do you actually need your login button? You need your login button when you're not authenticated, right? That makes sense. So you're not authenticated, so how do we know that? Auth state provides us something called is authenticated. It's a Boolean variable which tells us if the user is authenticated or not. So what do you mean by that? Every time you use an application, when you go to a third party application that uses Google Auth, or forget that, say Facebook, you've logged into Facebook. So every time you visit Facebook, do you log in every time? Yes or no? Tell me in the comments, guys. Do you log in every time you log into Facebook? You know, you provide your authentication information, you know, your user credentials. Do you do that? Or does Facebook automatically know that, okay, this is coming from Sricharan's browser, so Sricharan must be logged in and he was the latest person to log in? So what happens? What happens? Let me know in the comments. So yeah, of course, happens is we will get our Facebook knows that this is the person that's authenticated. It authenticates automatically. You don't have to put in your username and password again and again, right? So Okta does that too. So we need to know if he's authenticated. If he is, then we can directly send him to our profile page. We don't want to send him to the login page, right? So that's what this is. So if the person is not authenticated, that's when we give them the login button, right? We tell them login if that person is not available. Else what happens is, what say you're authenticated, so what happens in that case? So we can say else return, what can we say, let's say you are authenticated. We can just print that, right? You're authenticated. We can print that in our home page. We can just say, okay, fine, you're authenticated. All right, so that's our home page. Basically what we've done is we want to see if Okta has given us the user information. We want to see if the person is authenticated or not. If he is authenticated, we say you're authenticated, else we give him the login button, right? So how do we handle the login function over here? Okta takes care of that too again. So it's just a one line code. That's it. So we say Okta auth, and it provides us with a function called sign in with redirect. Now, that's it. That's all you have to do. Sign in with redirect, and you have to pass in a original URI. You remember this, right? Like I showed you, you have to pass in your original URI, which will tell you where do you want me to log in to, why do you want me to send the user to after the person has logged in. So once I've logged in, I want you to send me to my profile page. So that's what I want you to do. Now, yes, of course, you can use Okta's own login page. In some cases, you would want to create your own fancy login page with the great styles and animations. So for that, Okta does provide another function called sign in with credentials, which would let you, pass your username and your. So we can look into the documentation for that. That is pretty cool. You can, if you look into the documentation, it will tell you we have the sign in with credentials. There we go. So what this does is when you create your login form, you basically ask for an email ID, username, or password, right? Look over here. So you have to pass in your username and password. So this gives you your session cookie. And when you have that session in token over here, you use this particular function, sign in with redirect, and that will give you your access token, the one that we have to send to the backend to make any API calls, right? So that's our homepage done. And let's go to our profile page. So over here, now the profile page over here is pretty simple. So what shall we do? We need to get all the, we discussed that we'll make a profile page where we'll see what all information Okta has on us, right? So we need to take care of that. So what we can do is, again, we'll take care of importing, Okta auth. So use Okta auth from Okta React. All right. So we've called in our hook, and we'll call in those as well. Let me just copy paste this, and let's paste it over here. Okay. So what does this tell you? It's just basically your getting in this Okta auth function and your auth state, right? That's what you're doing. That's basically it. Now, what do I need to do? I need to get my information from Okta. So how do you do that? You have to make an API call to Okta to get all that information, right? So what you can do is, you to make an API call in React, as you know, you create a use effect, right? So let's use the use effect component, and let's say use effect, and you make a function, and then you pass in your dependencies. So what API call do I call? So Okta provides with that too. So it's called get user. So once you do that, you have to of course, this is an API call. That means it returns a promise, right? So you have to handle that. So let's say that it's called info, right? The data that is sent back to us is called info. Now, how do we make use of this? We can say store it in a state in React. So let's create a state over here. Say we'll say const user info. Let's put this inside brackets and set user info, right? And let's say initially it's null, right? It's initially null. Oh, and again, we have to handle, this is a secure route, right? So we have to handle what happens when our auth state is empty. What happens? Say a user directly jumps to our slash profile page. You should not allow that, right? So what you have to do is, since this is React, say I've logged in, I've gotten all my profile page information, and I log out. The profile page should not remain just as is, right? So what I do is, I have to set it to null, right? So say we don't have my auth state yet, or auth state dot is authenticated. So I'm not logged in, or my information is not available. So what do I say? I should say that I should set my user info to null again, right? Say it is already populated, I log out, and then it shouldn't be still be populated because I'm logged out. My information shouldn't stay in the browser. So I have to set it to null. And once I that is not the case, if we have logged in, and if we have all the user information and everything is good, everything's working fine, then we make use of the get user API call. So in that case, we set user info, and we'll put it as info for now. We'll see what Okta returns to us. Now you might see that we have an error over here. What does it say? We have to put in our dependencies, right? So that's how use effect works. So we say auth state and Okta auth. So our use effect error is gone. Now how do we print that over here? So for that, we need to print the user info over here, right? We can just simply use React's table over here. So let me create another div, and then let me create a table, and So first my heading will be, so an object, what does an JavaScript object contain? It contains a key and a value, right? So we'll put that. So in the first row we'll have something called key, and we have something called a value, right? So we have our header ready, headings basically, and then let's put in our the body, so our table body. And over here we need to get information from the info. Now we don't know what information Okta contains about us, right? What and all is it being sent? So for that, what we have to do is we have to make use of the object that JavaScript provides us, and we'll make use of the entries function. So what do we need to pass? We need to pass the user info basically. So let's say we pass in user info, and that returns a array. So we'll say map, and what do we get? We get so basically in map you just go through the array, right? So let's just say the array element is called claim entry. All right, now what we do over here is let's get the key and our value over here. So we'll say our claim name is equal to claim entry of 0. So basically it returns a two valued array, and the first value in it is the key and the second value is the value. So we'll say claim value, and this will be array second element. And we'll just, since this is a map, it is important when you return the uh, React component that it needs to have a key, right? So we can say const claim id equals, we can just say something like this, claim, and then let's use the claim name over here. Let's do that. Let's keep it simple. So we have our claim name, we have our claim value. So how do we return this? So we say return. All right. So we return that, and we will create a row, and inside the row we have to pass in our key. So that can be the claim ID. Claim ID, and what else? We have to pass in our values. So first one is the key, which means it is the claim name. And what's the second one? Second heading is a value, so we pass in the claim value. So for claim value we need to provide it an ID, because this is a map, right? So we do that as claim ID. All right, so we have our information over here. So let's see how Okta works in reality, right? Okay, so we have our home route over here. We have our login button. So let's say, let me refresh over here, and let me click into the login button. What do you think would happen? Oh, so we've been taken to our user page over here, right? We've been taken to our user page, Okta's user page. Can someone tell me what this particular link is in the chats? Let me know what this particular link is. We've seen this particular link 3 times. So what do you think this particular link is? All right, so this particular link is the issuer, if you remember. So what is this particular issuer? It basically is the authorization server. This link is the link for our authorization server. So if you remember, Krisha, in our backend created the test user, right? So we'll just put it over here. So okay, so that's the password, and that's our test@test.com. Okay, so now we've come back to our profile page, right? We have come back. It, if you've seen that, you could have seen it went to slash login slash callback, and then it came back to slash profile, right? So now that was the use of this particular URL, right, over here. This login callback that Okta React provides us with. So that was handled by, this entire thing was handled by login callback, the component from Okta. Okay, so right here we need to see our information, but we are not. So let's see what happens. Let's go to our console. Okay, so we have some errors over here. Cannot convert undefined or null to object. Okay, so let's see what that is. It says profile and line number 28. Ooh, okay, so we've missed a step over here. Okay, so it says object.entries, this particular line is an error. Can someone say why we are getting an error over here? Somebody take a wild guess. It's a bit hard to get over here. Somebody take a wild guess. Why are we getting an error? Why are we not getting our user information over here? Why is it null? We did set it in our use effect, but why is it null? Can somebody say? Clue. We've set user info as null over here. So what does that mean? What does that mean? It's either I am either the auth state is not available or I am not authenticated. So which one of these two is it? Which one of these two is it? Which case is it? Which case are we? Which case did we forget to handle? Why am I getting this particular error? Can someone put it in the chats? Let's see. Let's see who gets it. It's a fun little game over here. All right. Okay. Don't worry. The reason is, again, like I said, I've authenticated myself, right? I have authenticated myself. I went into my login, and through Okta's login I did login and everything. But why am I, so this particular should be true, right? It should be true. I mean, it should be false because I am authenticated, so not of true is false. So the place where it should be a trouble is this particular path, which means our auth state is not yet populated. That is the error. So how do we resolve that? So we can say something like, if user info is null, okay, user info is null, we can return something like this. Say something like fetching user profile. Basically, it's another loading page you can think of. So our user info is not yet, we didn't get a user info yet, but we've called a user info object, so that should be an error, of course. So let's refresh. So we get our user profile. Now we get another error over here. Objects are not as valid as React child. Why do you think that is? What is the error over here? Can somebody tell me? All right. So the problem comes over here is because we have to return this particular part, right? And when we return it, we get this entire thing is considered as an object. So how do we make that? It says that object, you can't handle objects. Why is that? So the problem comes over here. The problem is our claim value over here. So when I say an object, it has key and values, right? Key and values. Now that value can take any data type, right? It can be a number, string, boolean value. It can also be an object. So say when I print my claim value over here, what happens is, say in one particular case, my user info contains a object key value pair where the value is an object. So that would be an error. We have to handle that particular error too. So what we say is, we say to string. Once we've done that, so we say it's an object, but let's keep it as string over here. So okay, so what did we get here? We got the entire key value pairs that user info provides us, right? So what is stored in Okta's backend? What stored? So we have our sub, we have some random looking weird ID, and we have a name that is test that was created by Krishab on the account, right? and we have a local, and we have our email ID, we have our preferred username, given name, family name, and a bunch of other IDs. So there's not a lot of confidential information that you can see is Okta doesn't share any confidential information with the third party application. In this case is the React application we are developing, and this is say my account. I don't see any confidential information, right? I just see America, Los Angeles. That doesn't mean anything, right? So we've done all that. We've gotten our entire profile, and we've seen how Okta has taken care of, the entire authentication part. So Krishup created a resource server, right? How do we access that? Now we are authenticated and everything is fine. We have talked on the client side, everything is fine. So how do we contact with our backend? So for that, we'll make a API call to the. So we'll say something like call backend, and we'll create a function, and we'll create a button called API, which will call this particular function, right? So what can we do? If you remember in my package.json, put in a I installed a dependency called Axios, right? So that is used to get in our make the API calls for us. So where do I need to make the API call to our protected route, right? That's what if you've seen, he demonstrated it to us. Krishan demonstrated to us that he called the API call, but he got a result as a forbidden because he didn't have the access token. Now we do have the access token. So we'll copy this particular link, and this is the URL we are going to give it to. And then we should, after this, pass something called config. Now, what is this config? It's basically the headers we need to pass, because in order to authorize us, we need to pass something called the access token. If you remember the JWT in the initial part, right? So for that, we'll say we'll pass headers, and this is an object, right? So headers is our key, and our value will be an object. And in our headers, we need to pass something called authorization. And there we go, authorization. Now this authorization is a string basically, which starts with the word bearer. So it is always necessary that you need to have this particular string called bearer, and then you have to pass in your access token. Now where do you get the access token from? Of course, from Okta. So how do we get the access token? How do we access it? That is given through our auth state. Remember what I told you about auth state? It contains the entire authentication information about Okta, right? So we have to say auth state dot access token. Now this access token itself is an entire object inside which we have this access token again. It's weird. Yes, you have to call it again. Remember, so this particular access token is the string that we have to pass to the API call, right? To the server, resource server, which will authorize us and then tell us, okay, we are a legitimate user and you can allow us to access our user. So what then? This is an API call. Of course, we have to handle the promise. So now what? We get a result. And what shall we do with the result? If you remember the backend that Krisha wrote, he would send us back a message. How do we get that message? Let's put that inside a use state too. So let's say we have message, and we have set message, and initially let it be a normal string. So we've gotten, so once we make our callback and everything is successful, we are authorized, our access token works, we pass in, we get back a message. So we put that inside our rest.data.message. That's how we get the particular, that's how Krishup said it, right? He's gave a particular variable called message. So that's what we're accessing over here. So we get that. Now again, we have to handle the errors too. So we can say error. Let's keep it simple for now, and we'll just console log the errors for now. Console log error. Okay. So what we've done over here is we've created a backend call to our protected route, and we have our authorization. We pass in our access token, and we get a reply as a message. Now let's print it. First, let's create the button, right? Let's say button, and let the button be called call API, right? Call API, and the on click should be call backend, right? Call backend. So call backend. So what do you think would happen when we do the call backend? So basically, it makes the backend call for us, and it will return the return the message inside our message. So we need to print that too, because we need to know what the message is. So we'll say message over here, as simple as that. So let's check it out. So we have our call API button over here. So let's refresh. We have our fetching user profile, because again, auth state, we are getting it's being populated. And let's click the API call API. It of course takes some time. Oh, and look at what we get our hello test at test.com. So if you remember how Rishabh set it up, he set it up as send a hello and the email ID, right? He said the email ID, this is test at test.com. Now this is the important part. In his verifier, he used the access token that we sent, right? He used this particular access token, which means the server does not know who we are. So this particular access token contains the information that tells us who we are, right? And then he just gets it from Okta, and he tells us, okay, this particular access token has requested information, and I want the email ID pertaining to that particular access token, and he just says hello test at test.com. That's the entire front end, guys. That's entire front end and back end mixed together. So that's the entire application that we built today. And let's take a small recap. Yes, what did we build? So we started off with the backend. We actually started off with creating a developer account in Okta, and then we created the um, application in Okta to get our client ID and all that information. Issuer. We basically registered our application, the React and Node.js application in our Okta. So Okta actually it put a separate authorization server for us. It dedicated a server for us, right? And when we finished with that, we used those client ID, or let's take a look at that also. It's an Okta config, yes. So it took the client ID and the issuer and all that information, and oops, okay. So we make use of all that information, and he created a backend where he created a route called protected/home, which is a secure route you can't access without authorization, and it sends you back a message called hello and then the username. So the server is completely blind to who we are. Every information that it gets is through Okta. So that's the third party application. That's how we use Okta over here. And in the front end, we built a homepage and a profile page. So basically, our homepage is an open route; anybody can access it. That's how you build websites. And our profile page, we need to secure this route, because if you're not logged in, you can't use it. Let's look at what happens. Okay, we've seen all that. And Okta actually stores all this information in our local storage in a special cookie actually. So if you look over here, we have Okta Auth nonce and Okta Auth state, right? So these are special cookies that Okta creates and stores all our access tokens and all that information. So let's remove them. And what does this mean? When I remove all my information, according to Okta, I'm still not logged in. I don't have the Okta auth state. So what should happen? Let's refresh and see what happens. I've refreshed it. I'm accessing a secure route. So what should happen? Okay, so we are getting. Okay, we didn't remove the all of the cookies. We removed only a few of them. So let's remove all of them and remove. Done and refresh. So we've removed entire information, and we are trying to access the secured route, but Okta does not allow that. This particular security component takes care of that takes care of those scenarios where you're trying to access a secure route, but the person is not authenticated. So what it does is it sends you back into the Okta's login page, so you can log in and then you can access your route, right? So that's the entire use of Okta in your front end and back end. So I guess you guys learned something new today. So that's our entire front end and back end. And Hope you guys learned something interesting today. If you guys have any doubts, do let us know. We will clear them right now. Any doubts, people? Anything at all?
Yeah, feel free to ask.
So that was the end of our session. We basically created a backend and a front end. We used Okta as an authentication, and you can revisit this particular stream, and you can use it if you're building a web application and you want a third party uh, user, right? You can do that, of course. All right, so I guess you guys don't have any doubts, and that means we have taken a great session. Thank you,
Yeah.
and
Thank you, guys.
it was really great taking this session. And there will be more sessions from GDSC BIT. Stay tuned, subscribe to GDSC's YouTube channel. All right, bye bye. Have a good day. Have a
Bye.
good night.